Soundstripe.
Hi, I'm SJ.
And I'm Pegsy.
Welcome to our Heels in the Hierarchy podcast, where we discuss the experiences and challenges faced by aspiring women in the workplace.
We'll share insights to help you gain new perspectives, practical strategies and reassurance. We'll also bring in occasional guests who share their stories and reveal that behind the polished exterior, even accomplished women face challenges just like yours.
We hope you'll laugh, learn and enjoy different perspectives around women in work and leadership. So step inside an episode of Heels in the Hierarchy, empowering women
without stepping on toes.
Hi, welcome to our almost last episode of Series 2, which is, I can't really believe we've finished Series 2 already.
I know.
But this is our reflections. Oh, mirror do that. So it's kind of a look back really on the last episodes that we've done and anything we've kind of done. For those who hasn't checked out our Series 1, please do if you're new. But yeah, should we get down to it? So the first one was the self-care episode, the essential art of self-care and a leadership secret weapon. I really enjoyed doing that because I felt like it refreshed some of the work that I do in terms of sharing some of the insights and practicalities. And that was a really interesting discussion for me.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I mean, we started it towards the start of the summer holiday period. So it was the middle of June. And quite early on in the discussion, we talked about the importance of self-care in leadership and as a sort of tool for our own management approach. And of course, we talk about putting your own gas mask on first, but it's a really important thing for managers, in my experience, but particularly for new managers or managers taking that first step into middle management, to realise that as their team gets bigger, they don't need to carry more on their shoulders. So talking about the importance of self-care addresses that, but also it's about the congruence between what you do as a leader and what you ask your team to do, particularly around self-care. You talked a lot, SJ, about the difference between self-care and well-being and how important that was, and practicing self-care in your daily life.
Well, I like that, coming back to, like, as a leader, is mirroring, and we talked about the language and perception, and the perception of what self-care is and the language and how important that is. And I think I remember doing a lot around keep emphasizing practical ways. And I think sometimes we think that we know what self-care is rather than a daily choice to prioritize self, what we need, and noticing our own needs, but not just, I want a cup of tea, but actually, how's my body? Connecting with yourself, thinking about that. And it helps you to think through a different lens of noticing your teammates and your colleagues around, noticing yourself and the body and the body language and your breathing and noticing how the speech and things like that, and how language is really important and how we mirror that. So yeah, I think it's something that we wanted to start this series again, because it was the season when it was quite important to start, but actually it's something that we're really passionate about.
And we also said, this is such an important part of workplace culture. On a slightly separate topic, I've been receiving a lot of updates and articles on mental health first aid from specialists who are saying that a lot of organisations are starting to disassociate themselves from the importance of mental health first aid. And I think the same risks being true of self-care as a central tenet of good workplace culture if we are in a world where we're just almost too busy to practice self-care as leaders.
Yeah.
And we just expect other people to do it.
And I think what stands out is that some of those things are a constant reminder of those 3 Ps, which were the, prioritize yourself, practice, because obviously not everything works all the time and you need other things, but actually about perseverance. And it's very easy for us to, oh, that didn't work and move it. But actually, it's, persevering with a new skill, Like if you're learning the piano, you don't just do it once and go, well, that didn't work, I'm not going to do it again.
Yes.
You have to be kind to yourself and understand, what's working for you, what isn't. And it's the small, tiny things, not the big, extravagant spa days, for example, that really make the difference. It's the small changes. And I'm having a good discussion about that. So, yeah, I enjoyed doing episode 1 around self-care. I'm going to be a bit biased here and just say I think this is our favourite series so far. I think the first one for me was very much around getting it started and celebrating our success of getting it off the ground. But I think each topic of this particular series has been quite, what's the word? Poignant, I think, in the world and the culture that we're living in.
Yeah.
So episode 2, that was all about exploring self-awareness and understanding transform interactions, which was emotional intelligence, wasn't it?
There was a lot in there about emotional intelligence, conflict and team dynamics, and psychological safety. And I think, again, emotional intelligence is one of those concepts that was grounded in really good quality research. But the further it's moved away from the timeline of when that research was first out and so impactful, over time, we've potentially got a little bit lazy in how we connect to and think about emotional intelligence. So having the opportunity to discuss the conflict and team dynamics, the importance of it in the workplace. And one of the things I did enjoy talking about was kind of changing the narrative about resilience, which I always sort of joke about being a sort of get over yourself, grow up. And
that element of the I to the we.
Yes.
That it's not about you, it's about how you perceive the world, how you interact with others. It's a joint perception of the world, and actually you're being aware of yourself, have self-awareness and the irony, how many people don't necessarily have self-awareness. And actually, again, it's a learning skill that both as a leader, we need to be working more towards to help people to be aware of their interactions with others, but the impact it has in terms of morale and energy and, the way that people interact as a team. So I think, there's that huge difference between resilience and emotional intelligence. But again, it's about helping people to think it's not, I don't want people to go, oh, that's interesting. It's actually, okay, well, that's going to have a real big impact if I do it well, or if I take it seriously. And how do we make that shift between doing the job and excelling within a team? Yeah, I think that was just self-awareness is so important, and interacting and transforming interaction with your peers and your colleagues and in the world around you, really.
I think there's also the importance of being an authentic leader, showing your vulnerability in an authentic and congruent way, and managing with humanity. And I recall that we talked about the fact that managing with humanity does not mean that we have to well, both, really.
Yeah.
But we don't have to kind of manage our team with kid gloves or be so fearful of upsetting people that we don't address poor performance, that we don't set challenging goals and targets, that we don't have difficult conversations, but that we actually create that team and organizational culture to encourage people to be their really authentic selves at work, because that's where you get the best possible outcomes from your team. We are all very, very individual. If there was a calculation for the number of factors in a human person, and then you multiply that by the number of days in that individual's working life, and then multiply that by the number of things that might happen to cause an individual to behave in the way that they might, it then becomes such a big number that we can't have a blueprint for management that works for every individual on every day in every circumstance. And I think that's where emotional intelligence and creating a good culture where everyone in the team, the department and the organisation really try and support good emotional intelligence in themselves and in others, will sort of really reap benefits.
Yeah, I think that's part of feeling safe, feeling valued, and obviously trying to contribute to getting people to get their best selves. So I suppose if you want to navigate in advancement and striving in life, work-life balance, I think leading a team, I think that's a really good insight, I think, in reality, what that looks like in a workplace.
And then around mid-July, we were talking about vulnerability and looking at feedback, rethinking how we give feedback in the workplace and how that vulnerability can be really harnessed for beneficial.
I remember laughing after I heard this one, because I remember going, I don't know how many times we must have said feedback in that episode, because it was about feedback.
Yeah.
Helping people think about vulnerability, honesty and feedback. And literally, I think could have had bingo how many times we say feedback in that one. But I think, again, it's something that we've talked about so many times, about so many things in management. When we talk about it, is people skills and understanding the human nature, and how taking that out of the ego and making people the priority in your team and feeling valued, and the how vulnerability, when you harness it well and you think about understanding being human to human, that has so much power in building trust and rapport and good reputation of character. And people want to be in your team, and they want to have loyalty, and they want to stay. And a lot of responsibility in any kind of leadership management role is mirroring the behaviour you want to see, and in empowering others to go beyond you and able to thrive rather than have an ego, isn't it? So and mirroring what actually good feedback was and what that means. And sometimes that is, like you say, uncomfortable, but it's actually the way that it can be discussed. It can be so gentle, not confrontational. So I'm talking about that.
But also, we did have a good discussion as part of that podcast about the difference between supervision and feedback.
That's true,
from our respective backgrounds, but equally how each discipline could see the advantage of adapting some of the practices of the other.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that's why it's quite a nice discussion, because I think it's the first time we spoke majority of the time from those perspectives, from our professional backgrounds of that role, and comparing and contrasting almost, and finding so many similarities in some senses when it comes to the people management side and working with people, isn't it? So I think it was really interesting actually to hear your perspective and from your experience, and how that contrasts to therapy and supervision, particularly, especially in groups and individuals, and how you work with people. So I'm hoping a lot of people got a lot of good tips and tricks on that one.
I think also we were talking about how there's a risk that feedback can be very formulaic. If you build trust, which again is a recurring theme I know through our podcasts, and authenticity and sharing your vulnerability as a leader, you will build a really strong and deep level of trust with team members that can be really powerful at times when you need individuals to pull together for the overall achievement of something team related or project related. And I can't remember if it was in that podcast, but one of my favorite sayings is trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. I think I mentioned it at
that was a really nice
time.
Visual metaphor.
It
takes a long time for people to really feel comfortable and safe and trust. Absolutely takes a second.
Once it's broken. I
really enjoyed doing that. I think the next episode, I think we had our amazing guest JJ sharing her experience and things, and obviously we had a trigger warning around that, because it evoked into quite a strong personal story, faith, community, strength, but also difficult topics around domestic abuse, harm. It's always an honour, isn't it, when we have a guest and sharing people's stories? It's always enriching when people feel comfortable to trust you to be able to broadcast their own story based on experience, because they have something that will be so resonating with so many people that may be struggling in silence and may not want to share, but having somebody share their story opens an opportunity to go, wow, okay, somebody's been able to be honest and open about their experience, and specifically from the cultural perspective that she was sharing. So,
but she was sharing with us the fact that while she was sort of navigating her own journey through her career hierarchy, there were a lot of really quite challenging and conflicting things going on in her personal life, and how she tried to sort of navigate those two often contrasting worlds. And this was about an individual who talked about leadership and their life experiences. It spoke to me about the importance of seeing leadership as a people-centric approach, philosophy, skill, rather than a book of steps and stages that you follow this flow chart. You do it this way, refer to chapter 15, and here's a checklist to make sure that you've done this. JJ's story was really compelling. She is in a leadership role. She has been in leadership roles in the past, and as I say, continues to be. And at times in her personal life, that must have been a really difficult thing or it could have been an easy thing, I should say, maybe, to sort of have put on a cloak of leadership behaviours. So I thought that was quite impactful.
The other element around it was her openness to talk about her culture and faith.
Yeah.
That actually, that's what's been able to go, actually, it's not all bad. You know, we sometimes have this perception that once something happens, it's how it's going to work, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas actually we're in a position where it's very much, oh, wow, this was not how my life had planned, but this is exactly what else has happened. And this is what I've learned from it. You know, has it having a choice of growth and learning beyond your expectations. So it's not the path that is easy or what you expected, but actually there's always another option for her, is through her faith and for her community, which I think was, you know, speaks a lot about character, really.
There was religious faith in there as well, but there was the faith that things would work out. And those are, again, intertwined in her religion. It was part of her character and psyche, and I guess you can't completely separate those two, but they are so intertwined. Again, I thought that was really impactful.
No, I loved it. I think it's always nice to have words of wisdom and insight and perspective. You know, we know each other really well. It's always nice to have somebody else bring another perspective. And, you know, a lot of this series is about quite a lot of vulnerable topics, actually. I was thinking about it, being a bit more rawer, if that's even a word, but being raw with the reality of being a woman, the reality of being in the workplace, the reality of family life. And so this kind of almost does it all in a podcast episode, really.
JJ started the podcast almost saying, look, I'm just an ordinary woman and I haven't really got much of a story. And there were so many poignant moments in that story, including some which unfortunately didn't get
aired because of the editing software cut out.
Yeah, the editing software cut out quite a long pause that was so impactful, and it was a shame that wasn't there, but I think you would have sort of sensed that in our voices. But also that from the initial, I'm just an ordinary woman and I haven't really got anything to say, she concluded by actually sharing some really substantial words of wisdom.
Yeah. And I think, partly the reason why I wanted to on the podcast originally is because actually that's the thing, isn't it? There's no ego involved. There is no, this is my life and isn't this what you want to hear? It's actually, this is the reality of being a woman. This is the reality of life not going to plan. However, this is how your founding elements can build character, build strength, and keep you going through all of these things. And sometimes we're not necessarily able to have those spaces to share. And she was very passionate about wanting to talk about faith, wanted to talk about her culture, and sharing her experience to encourage our listeners. And if there's anybody that got impacted by that and felt they were seen, that was important.
Yeah,
and I think that's why it's, we've made sure that it was as raw as possible.
We next touched on a very brief clip of Simon Sinek with some leadership insights, and that was about mid-August, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And yet, for such a tiny clip,
there was so much
we spoke about.
There was so much.
Yes.
I remember it was just almost like had so much to say, or like just bouncing off each other, because it doesn't matter how much you prepare, stuff just comes out. And it was about negative biasness, isn't it? Perspectives that you walk into a workplace and somebody says something, or they're always, and or mind that, and how that could be so dangerous in taking on a role or taking other people's perspectives on. And I remember that being a real, not provoking, but something that was quite. We almost didn't know when to stop.
Yeah,
because there was so much, and we had so many different stories and elements to it. But I think that, and it was all about like the impact of that, the cost to that person, the impact of a team and trust, for example.
There was also this really tight link between trust and team dynamics, and actually how if you can build really good trust-based leadership styles, you get so much more from the team. And I hesitated just momentarily because I don't want anyone to think that we're advocating for maximizing productivity, potentially at the risk of authenticity. This is achieving goals is a good outcome, and getting a really high-performing team that is led by really strong, authentic, trust-based leadership is the bit that makes the high-performing team. It doesn't necessarily mean that you make a more efficient team who's able to work even harder and do even more in, a much shorter time frame. But just how, reflecting on a couple of episodes that we've discussed here, trust and feedback and communication are such central messages.
Again, it keeps going back to that human connection, doesn't it? And actually having the courage in leadership to be able to not take on everyone else's perspective, and sometimes challenge that negative narrative that happens, because actually, without knowing it, sometimes you embody that anyway, and then sometimes having the courage to go, that, thanks for that perspective, but actually I'm going to do that. And also the impact of, just having somebody else know your blind spots, having someone, having a peer that can just point that out, that would be able to be courageous enough to go, are you saying that because that's what's happened? Or is that a fact, or is that just your opinion because that's your perspective of that person? And that's a really tricky one, because you have to really be open enough to your own feedback. You get used to be able to give other people feedback and etc. But actually, when peers and other people are saying, I just want to check out when you say that, because that's often the hardest relationship to have, when you trust somebody enough to go, you've got a bit of a blind spot there, just be cautious. And that takes a long time to build. But the impact and the effectiveness of having somebody to do that, I think it really builds a team that, as a leadership team particularly, that you can ensure that it's not a biased conversation.
I made the observation that not everyone, but a substantial number of leaders as they go through the hierarchy, their self-defense mechanism is often about becoming less vulnerable, less aware of their blind spots, so that then other people are less likely to feel comfortable to be curious and to potentially challenge some of those blind spots. And they are blind spots, the very sort of sentiment of it. We know we can identify our weaknesses if we take the time to stop and think about it. But blind spots are the unknown to us. So we need to create that trust with our peers. Yeah, I think
the
really
reason
important.
why that we particularly looked at that is it really struck a chord, how often it happens unconsciously. Actually, when I saw that, I think that's where like, oh my goodness, we need to talk about that. Mainly because it was just like, how many times does that happen? How many times do we lack the ability to be aware that that's not actually what's happening, that someone's, making the comment about, oh, they are always, or no, watch them, because actually thinking, oh, thanks for the heads up. But actually, it's already planted a seed of cautiousness about people without even having that. And I think, it's really important to understand our responsibility, our own accountability, actually, of ensuring that our behaviours and unconscious things are actually true. Yeah, and I think that partly goes back to the other one we talked about earlier, and things around supervision, that we like almost reminds me of that bit, that the higher you are, no supervision or coaching for someone to point that out, and how important it is to have a peer and other people to keep an eye. You're not being your own rule.
And one of the values of that comparing and contrasting between supervision and coaching is also that often the coach has to work with the information that the coachee shares, where there is a different approach to accountability in supervision that I think is really important. And it's something I would really love to see more leaders embrace.
And then finally, our last episode, one that's just been launched, is around the menopause.
Yeah. And again, another discussion that was really rich in the way that we approach the subject, some of the stories that we shared, the statistics that you shared, and the quiz, which I just want to point out, I got 11 out of 15 on.
I just think it's one of those, again, another topic that, wouldn't necessarily be seen in the top 5 probably of a leadership or management or women in the workplace. But as you know from the stats that we talked about, it's pretty much impacting so many women in that position. And it would be blind and biased of us not to talk about it.
One of the other things that I'm proud of us for doing is our approach is more about an emotional connection to a topic, emotional experiences, personal insights and stories, and not this each episode needing to be a textbook you can take away.
It's a workbook of what you get. This is what it is. This is what the theory says, and this is what it looks like. So and again, it's about, the beauty of these episodes is that we can have a point, but then we go on tangents on things because our minds go somewhere else, or prompt each other to go, oh, that's so true. And I think that's where the richness comes in, because you can have a flow all you like, but when it comes to topics like the menopause, it's so personal. So it'd almost be ignorant of us to give people like a how-to guide. Because actually that's not how our bodies work. That's not how our hormones work. And that's absolutely not how we interact with the world. So it'd almost be, it would be wrong for us to be able to have that approach. But, our hope is that we've had discussions enough to help people think about their attitudes towards it, their perspectives towards their own beliefs, their own cultures, how they can probably think about having conversations about menopause, celebrating. I think there's something that we talked about a lot of people's experience, and moving away from these are the symptoms, what you need to do, but more about the individual
Yeah, very
and
much so.
how experienced and needed these women are in the workplace.
I agree. And I think that was a really enjoyable episode. It's really funny as well. We try and keep our episodes to about 40 minutes. We have a pre-recording discussion and rough template of the key points that we want to discuss. But there's so much that we find to talk about that regularly our episodes are doing, a good hour. Our series 1 was very sort of tentative, like, we're doing a podcast and we're not really sure.
Mm-hmm.
And almost, I think it would be fair to say, we probably tried too hard to do it. What's your reflections on where we are now as we reach the end of series 2 and reflect on series 2?
Well, I don't think you get enough credit. So for our listeners, Pegsy is absolutely I don't think the brains or the expert in the background. If anyone's listening and knows anyone that would love to sponsor us or be able to support us in any way for that, please get in touch. But at the moment, our incredible Pegsy is the brains behind all of that. And so, I think why it's run so smoothly is that, yes, we've been able to have software to be able to work with. But you put the time in to be able to know how to do that. So everything seems so much more smoother. You've had more confidence and the ability to be able to understand how it works and how to do it, which makes me laugh. And sometimes, so if there's a little bits of things like we talked about, pauses being cut or things are really quick, it's actually the software, not because we're editing, right? But it has saved us so much time. And I think it's given us the time back to be freer with our conversations, because you don't have to do so much block editing. We can just go, actually, we're both confident in our own abilities. We trust each other's perspectives, be able to free flow a little bit more. We've got better framework, I think, and we've done it. So I think once you've done something, but we've, particularly you have had a huge journey on technology and understanding, and there's so much. I don't think our listeners really understand how much goes in to creating a podcast. We don't just sit here with the microphone and start talking. There's huge amounts, and so you absolutely need to take all the credit for that. So
no, not at all. I wouldn't have done it without you.
But I think that's the thing, isn't it? We talk about it a lot. There's lots of differences with us, which is what I think what makes it great. But I think this series, I've enjoyed the topics a lot more. I feel like we both have gone into the flow and kind of, what's the word? We're comfortable with our skill set, and we're just tag teaming a lot easier. And also we're less a bit formaic in terms of professional voice and making that's what it is, or interview style. We're quite comfortable with our flaws, and we've kind of made it as. So I've really enjoyed it. I think generally, as series 2, I think we've been able to be more fluid in terms of how we're doing it. And I've really loved it. So thank you for our listeners, but particularly, really huge gratitude to you, really.
Well, no, seriously, it would not have started if you'd have, and I am paraphrasing here, but basically not said to me, "Oi, when are we doing this podcast then?" And really got us over the line on that first one. But I'm excited by it, and I'm excited to start series 3.
Oh, it's mad, isn't it?
We've got so many topics that we want to discuss. There's so much. I mean, we have a working template of what we're going to cover, and we've got drafts for content for the next 3 series, and we still are coming up with more ideas.
Which also just shows how interesting women are.
Absolutely. Yes.
Troubles and all. But I mean, apart from obviously each episode, have you had the similar experience? How would you summarize your experience of series 2?
I feel a lot more relaxed. The recordings are going more smoothly. We did have some technical hitches with one of the episodes where we had about 5 4 stars, didn't we,
Yeah.
over a couple of weeks. But the discussions in those episodes have gone a lot more smoothly, which in turn has made the editing that much easier. But I actually can't see us running out of topics or suddenly realising that we've talked about that 4 times already. So I think that is a lot better. And I think it's also more authentic to where we originally wanted to be, where it wasn't about 2 senior leaders telling other people how marvellous we are and how to do their roles like us, how to lead. It was about the sort of, one of the basic premises was listening to 2 people sitting on a bus talking about things. It's taken us a little while to get that comfortable flow so that it might be an overheard conversation. But I think we've got there, and it's really about moving away from writing a book about a topic each episode, or this is our podcast and here's the book that we'll produce. I think that's, that is really important, because leadership is so complex. Leadership for women is often very challenging. Yes, it's getting better, but not always easier, and definitely not for everyone in every circumstance.
So our main ask really to everybody is what we've had to realise, which we're not very good at asking, is please share. I know we talked about it in our introduction, but please share this podcast. Please encourage people to download each episode, because then that actually supports us in order to be able to have our ranking across the platforms. And it helps us to be able to demonstrate that these topics and conversations are relevant. And obviously, like I say, I'm not shy anymore to be asking. So if there's anybody that knows anybody that could work with us or sponsor us in any way, or be able to know grants that we can kind of support just to continue the work that we're already doing, that would be incredible. But yeah, please share, please download, and make sure that everyone has their Heels in the Hierarchy podcast on their phones, or anywhere that you listen to them, really, isn't it? Your phone, your laptop, and it's on all downloadable platforms.
Yep.
And so it's been absolutely a pleasure doing Heels in the Hierarchy with SJ and Pegsy this season. Yeah. Make sure you tune in for our series 3 coming soon. So
we've got so many wonderful topics. Can't wait.
Until then, keep your heels high
and your standards higher.
There you go. It's a wrap.
Soundstripe.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed, please download the podcast on any of your platforms that you listen on. Share, like, and follow so others can enjoy. Until next time, keep your heels high and your standards higher.